Admiral stared at the tactical display with 4 eyes that had not blinked in over an hour. The red dots on the screen kept growing. Each dot was a void swarm bioship. Each bioship was a living nightmare that could eat an entire planet. The bridge of the flagship Morning Light was quiet except for the soft hum of dying systems. Half the control panels showed damage warnings. The other half showed worse news. 3 more colonies had gone dark in the last 6 hours. The swarm was getting closer to the home worlds. "Sir, we have another refugee fleet coming in from the sector," said his communications officer, a young whose blue scales had turned pale with stress. 200 civilian ships. They say the swarm hit their world this morning. Nodded slowly. "Guide them to the refugee camps on Haven Station. Make sure they get food and medical care." "Yes, sir, but sir," the officer hesitated. "Haven Station is already holding 3 million refugees. We don't have room for more." "Find room," said firmly. "We don't abandon our people." The truth was harsh. In 3 years of war, the Void Swarm had destroyed 17 star systems. 3 entire species had been wiped out completely. The Coalition had started the war with over 2,000 ships. Now they had less than 200 left. The swarm creatures were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They looked like giant insects crossed with spaceships, but they were alive. The smallest ones were half a kilometer long. The largest ones could stretch across entire moons. They had thick armor that could stop any weapon the Coalition possessed. When they got hurt, they healed in minutes. But the worst part was how they fed. The bioships would land on planets and start eating, not just the food or plants, everything. Soil, water, air, buildings, people. They consumed entire worlds and used the matter to make more of themselves. A single swarm ship could become 10 ships in just a few weeks if it had enough to eat. "Admiral," called his science officer from across the bridge. "The scanning stations in the outer rim are picking up more emergent signatures. It looks like another wave is coming." Felt his heart sink. Another wave meant at least 50 more bioships. His fleet couldn't handle 50 more enemies. They could barely handle 5. "How long do we have?" 12 hours, maybe less. They're moving faster than usual." The Admiral looked around his bridge. These were good people, the best the Coalition had left. They had fought bravely for 3 years against impossible odds, but brave wasn't enough anymore. They needed a miracle. "Sir," the communications officer spoke up again, "Command is asking for our status report." Almost laughed, but it would have been a bitter sound. Status report. The status was that they were losing, had been losing since day 1. The only reason any of them were still alive was because the swarm moved slowly between star systems, but that wouldn't last much longer. "Tell Command that we have maybe 1 more battle left in us," he said. "After that." He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone on the bridge knew what came after that. The people would join the other species that the swarm had erased from existence. The tactical officer, an older female with scars from the battle, spoke quietly. "Sir, what about the emergency protocols? The galaxy-wide distress signal?" "Had thought about that. The emergency signal would broadcast across every known star system, asking for help from any species that could travel between stars. The problem was that most species in the galaxy were already fighting the swarm or had been consumed by it. The few remaining civilizations were too far away or too weak to help. But what else could they do? "Do it," he ordered. "Send the signal on all frequencies. Include our star charts and everything we know about the swarm. Maybe someone out there has better weapons than we do." The communications officer began typing commands into his console. "What should the message say, sir?" Thought for a moment. How do you ask the entire galaxy for help? How do you explain that your entire civilization was about to disappear? "Keep it simple," he said. "Any sentient species capable of faster-than-light travel, please respond. Our civilization dies within days. We need immediate assistance against a hostile force that consumes entire worlds. Coordinates attached. Should I include our military specifications, our weapon capabilities? No point, replied sadly. If they're advanced enough to help us, they probably already have better weapons. If they don't have better weapons, then there's no point in them coming here to die with us. The officer finished typing and looked up. Signal ready, sir. Broadcasting on all known frequencies, including the unexplored sectors. Unexplored sectors? Asked. Yes, sir, including that young species from the Sol system, the ones called humans. Had heard of them. A primitive species that had only invented faster-than-light travel about 50 years ago. They were barely more advanced than the species the swarm had consumed in the first month of the war, but the emergency protocols required signaling everyone, even species too young to help. Send it, he ordered. The signal went out across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by quantum communication arrays. It would reach the closest civilizations in hours, the farthest ones in days. Most would probably ignore it. Those that didn't ignore it would likely be too far away to arrive in time. But it was all they had left. 6 hours later, the Void Swarm's latest wave arrived at the edge of the home system. Long-range sensors showed 80 bioships, each one hungry and looking for worlds to devour. The largest one was nearly 2 kilometers long, covered in acid-spewing weapon ports. Gathered his remaining fleet, 173 ships against 80 monsters. On paper, the numbers looked almost fair. In reality, each swarm bioship could probably destroy 5 coalition ships before taking serious damage. As his ships moved into position for humanity's last battle, wondered if anyone in the galaxy had even received their distress signal. And if they had, would anyone care enough about a dying species to risk their own ships? The bioships began their approach, their living hulls poolsing with hunger. In 12 hours this would all be over, one way or another. 12 hours after the distress signal went out, something impossible happened. Communications officer was monitoring the long-range arrays when his console started making sounds it had never made before. Admiral called out, his voice cracking with excitement. Sir, we're getting a response. Admiral had been studying battle plans that all ended the same way with everyone dead. He looked up from his tactical display with tired eyes. A response? From who? I'm not sure, sir. The signal is coming from the Sol system. That's the human system, but... Paused, checking his readings again. Sir, this doesn't make sense. The signal is arriving faster than it should. Light speed from Sol to here should take 6 days. This message was sent 12 hours ago, but it's arriving now. The science officer, Doctor, moved to check's console. Her 4 hands moved quickly over the controls, running calculations. After a moment, she looked up with confusion written across her features. The signal is being carried by some kind of quantum entanglement network, she said slowly. I've never seen anything like it. The mathematics behind this technology are advanced, very advanced. Admiral felt a small spark of hope, put the message through. The bridge speakers crackled to life. The voice that came through spoke in heavily accented Galactic Common, but the words were clear and strong. Coalition, this is Admiral of the Terran Navy. We received your distress call. Humanity does not tolerate genocidal aggressors. Battle Fleet Omega is already en route. Hold your positions. Silence filled the bridge. Everyone stared at the speakers as if they might say something else. Finally, found his voice. Did they say their fleet is already coming? Checked his console again. Yes, sir. But Admiral, that's impossible. Even if they left the moment they received our signal, it would take them weeks to get here with standard FTL drives. Doctor was studying her instruments with growing amazement. Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching our system. Multiple contacts moving at. This can't be right. What is it, Doctor? Sir, these ships are traveling at least 3 times faster than our best FTL drives. But that's not the strange part. The energy readings don't match any known propulsion system. It's like she paused, checking her calculations again. It's like they're folding space around themselves. As the science team worked frantically to understand what they were seeing, Admiral tried to process what was happening. Humans were supposed to be a young species. Primitive. They had achieved faster-than-light travel only recently. How could they have technology that was beyond anything the Coalition had ever seen? "Sir," interrupted his thoughts, "I'm receiving more transmissions from the approaching fleet. They're asking for our tactical situation and current enemy positions." "Send them everything," ordered. "Fleet positions, enemy strength, weapon capabilities. If they're really coming to help us, they need to know what they're facing." As the communications officer transmitted their data, the tactical display updated with new information. The approaching human fleet was small, only 37 ships according to their sensors. Against 80 void swarm bioships, those were terrible odds, even with advanced technology. But there was something else strange about the human ships. The energy signatures were enormous. Each human vessel was putting out more power than a Coalition dreadnought. Their largest ship showed energy readings that matched a small space station. "Admiral," the tactical officer called out, "the Void Swarm has detected the approaching signatures. They're changing course to intercept the human fleet." On the display, the red dots that represented enemy bioships were turning away from the Coalition worlds. The creatures seemed excited by the prospect of new prey. Their movement patterns showed increased aggression. They were hungry, and humans would provide fresh meat. "Should we move to support the human fleet?" asked his second-in-command. Considered this. His ships were damaged and low on ammunition, but leaving the humans to face the swarm alone seemed wrong, even if the humans claimed to have advanced technology. Before he could answer, another transmission came from the human fleet, the same strong voice as before. "Coalition fleet, this is Admiral. We strongly recommend you maintain a minimum safe distance of 50,000 kilometers from our engagement zone. Our weapons have a significant area of effect." "Area of effect," Doctor muttered. "What kind of weapons need 50,000 kilometers of clearance?" The answer would come soon enough. The human fleet was now only 6 hours away from the system. The Void Swarm was moving to meet them at the edge of the asteroid belt, ordered his remaining ships to pull back to the recommended distance and observe. As they waited, more information came in about the approaching human vessels. The largest ship was nearly 8 kilometers long, bigger than anything in the Coalition fleet. But it wasn't just the size that was impressive. The weapon signatures were unlike anything their sensors had ever detected. "Sir," Doctor reported, "I'm reading energy weapons that operate on principles I don't recognize, some kind of particle acceleration system, and something that looks like controlled gravity manipulation." Gravity weapons. Had heard of such things in theory, but the energy requirements were supposed to be impossible. "That's not all, sir. Their shields aren't deflector shields like ours. They appear to be using some kind of space-time distortion field, and their armor isn't metal, it's showing quantum-level energy patterns." The more they learned about the human ships, the less sense it made. How could a young species have technology that advanced? The Coalition had been spacefaring for thousands of years, and they had never developed anything close to what they were seeing. 3 hours before the fleets met, something else happened. The Void Swarm bioships began making sounds, not their usual hunting calls, but something different, something that almost sounded like excitement. "Sir," said nervously, "the bioships are communicating with each other. The translation matrix is picking up concepts of new prey and unknown energy signatures. I think they're looking forward to this battle." Admiral stared at the tactical display. 80 massive bioships that had destroyed entire civilizations, moving eagerly toward 37 human vessels. The creatures had no fear. They had never met anything that could truly hurt them. But as he watched the energy readings from the human fleet continue to climb, began to wonder if today might be different. For the first time in 3 years of war, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Hoping. The void swarm bioships had spread out across the edge of the system like hungry predators waiting for prey. Each creature was thousands of years old and had devoured countless worlds. They had never met an enemy they couldn't digest. Today, they expected another easy meal. Admiral watched the long-range sensors from his position 55,000 kilometers away. The human fleet would arrive any moment. He had positioned the remaining coalition ships in a defensive formation, ready to help if the humans needed it. His weapons were charged and his crews were at battle stations. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. Space itself began to tear. At first, it was just a shimmer in the darkness, like heat waves rising from hot metal. Then the shimmer grew brighter and brighter until it became blinding white light. The light began to twist and spiral, creating a hole in reality that hurt to look at. "Admiral," Doctor called out, her voice tight with amazement. "The energy readings are off our instruments. Whatever they're doing, it's using more power than our entire fleet generates in a month." The hole in space grew larger, and suddenly the human ships began to emerge. But they didn't come out slowly like normal ships exiting hyperspace. They burst through like bullets fired from a gun, trailing energy that made space itself ripple around them. The first ship through was enormous, the 8-kilometer flagship they had detected earlier. It was sleek and dark, covered in armor that seemed to absorb light. Weapon ports lined its hull like the eyes of a giant insect, each one glowing with contained energy. Behind the flagship came 36 other vessels, each one unique but clearly built for war. Some were long and narrow like spears. Others were broad and thick like shields. All of them radiated power that made the coalition ships look like toys in comparison. As the last human ship emerged, the tier in space snapped shut with a flash that lit up half the solar system. The human fleet hung in space for a moment, their engines humming with barely controlled energy. Then Admiral's voice came over the communication array, calm and professional. "Coalition fleet, this is Admiral aboard the UNS Indomitable. We have arrived as promised. Beginning tactical assessment of hostile forces." Activated his communication system. "Admiral, this is Admiral of the Coalition fleet. We are grateful for your arrival, but I must warn you, these creatures are not like normal enemies. Their armor can stop any weapon we possess, and they heal from damage within minutes." There was a pause. When Admiral spoke again, there was something in his voice that sounded like grim amusement. "Admiral, humanity appreciates the warning. However, we have been monitoring your conflict for some time through long-range sensors. We are familiar with the enemy's capabilities." "You've been watching us," Doctor whispered. Admiral continued. "We have analyzed the biological composition of the hostile forces, their defensive mechanisms, and their attack patterns. Our weapons have been specifically designed to counter these threats." On the tactical display, could see the human ships spreading into formation. It wasn't like any battle formation he had ever seen. Instead of creating defensive lines or attack wedges, the humans arranged their ships in a complex three-dimensional pattern that seemed to cover every possible angle of approach. "Admiral," said carefully, "there are 80 enemy bioships. Each one is larger than our biggest dreadnought. Are you certain 37 ships will be enough?" This time, Admiral's response came immediately. "Admiral, our analysis suggests that 37 ships is approximately 36 more than we actually need for this engagement. But humanity prefers to be thorough when protecting innocent lives." The confidence in the human admiral's voice was unshakable. It was the voice of someone who had never lost a battle, who expected victory as easily as breathing. On the sensors, the Void Swarm bioships had detected the human arrival. The creatures were moving into attack formation, their living hulls pulsing with excitement. They screeched across subspace frequencies, sounds of hunger and anticipation. "Sir," reported, "the bioships are accelerating toward the human fleet. They'll be in weapons range in 6 minutes." Admiral's voice came over the communication again. "Coalition fleet, we are about to engage the hostile forces. Please maintain your current distance. Our weapons systems require adequate clearance for safe operation." "Understood," replied. "Good hunting, Admiral." Admiral said, and now his voice carried a different tone, something harder and colder. "These creatures have killed billions of innocent people. This is not a hunt. This is an extermination." The human ships began to move forward, accelerating toward the Void Swarm with smooth precision. Each vessel moved independently, yet they maintained perfect formation. It was like watching a dance performed by masters who had practiced together for years. As they moved, the human ships began to power up their weapons. Energy readings that had already been impressive started climbing to levels that should have been impossible. The flagship alone was generating enough power to light up an entire star system. "Sir," Doctor called out, her voice filled with wonder. "I'm reading multiple weapon systems I don't recognize. Some kind of particle cascade generator, focused gravity manipulation beams, and something that's creating artificial quantum fields." "What do those things do?" asked. "I have no idea, sir. The physics behind them are beyond anything in our databases." The Void Swarm was closing in now, their bioships spreading wide to surround the smaller human fleet. The creatures had used this tactic thousands of times before. Surround the prey, overwhelm them with numbers, then feed on the wreckage. But something was different this time. The human ships weren't acting like prey. They moved with confidence, each one taking position with mechanical precision. Their weapon systems were fully charged and ready. Their shields shimmered with energy that bent light around them. Admiral's voice came one final time before the battle began. "All ships, this is Admiral. Remember, we are here to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Show these creatures what happens when they threaten the innocent. Weapons free. Engage at will." The response from 36 ship captains came back as one voice. "Weapons free, aye." And with that, humanity's battle fleet prepared to show the galaxy what humans did to monsters. At 14:32 Standard Time, the Void Swarm launched its attack. 80 bioships screamed forward, their living hulls pulsing with anticipation. Acid weapons charged. Tentacles writhed with hunger. The creatures had done this dance of death countless times before. At 14:37 Standard Time, the Void Swarm ceased to exist. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Admiral had witnessed many space battles during the 3-year war. He thought he understood what space combat looked like. Ships firing energy beams, explosions lighting up the darkness, debris spinning through space. He was completely unprepared for what happened when humans went to war. The first human weapon fired was something called a quantum cascade cannon. The weapon came from a ship called UNS Thunderbolt, a narrow vessel half the size of the flagship. When it fired, there was no visible beam, no explosion, no flash of light. Instead, the lead bioship simply stopped being there. "What happened?" demanded. "Where did it go?" Doctor stared at her instruments in confusion. "Sir, according to sensors, the bioship underwent complete molecular breakdown. The weapon didn't destroy it, it unraveled its atomic structure." On the tactical display, an expanding field of glowing particles marked where the bioship had been. But the field was growing, spreading to the next enemy vessel. When it touched the second bioship, the same thing happened. Molecular breakdown, complete structural failure. "The cascade is spreading," Doctor reported, her voice filled with amazement. One shot is taking out multiple targets. But the humans were just getting started. Another human ship, UNS Hurricane, fired something different: focused gravity manipulation beams. The weapons reached out like invisible hands and grabbed 3 bioships at once. The creatures tried to resist, their living hulls straining against forces they couldn't understand. Then the gravity fields reversed direction, and the 3 bioships were crushed into balls of compressed matter no bigger than shuttlecraft. The gravitational forces were so intense that the creatures' regeneration abilities meant nothing. They were squeezed down to the molecular level in seconds. The Void Swarm creatures began to realize they were in trouble. These weren't the weak energy weapons they were used to facing. These weapons worked on principles that made their natural armor useless. They tried to spread out, making themselves harder targets. The humans adapted immediately. 6 human ships fired in coordinated sequence, their weapons linked by quantum communication. Energy fields generators created artificial domains where the laws of physics worked differently. Inside these fields, the bioships found that their armor was no longer solid. Their weapons no longer functioned. Their ability to heal simply stopped working. Then the human ships fired conventional weapons into the fields. Simple energy beams that would normally bounce off bioship armor now cut through the creatures like knife through paper. 20 bioships died in that single coordinated attack. "Impossible," whispered the tactical officer. "How are they changing the laws of physics?" But Admiral was starting to understand something important about humanity. These weren't just advanced weapons. This was the result of a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to end conflicts quickly and decisively. The Void Swarm tried to rush the human line, hopping to overwhelm them with numbers and close-range attacks. It was a desperate move, but the creatures had no choice. Half their force was already gone, and they hadn't managed to damage a single human ship. The humans responded by activating their flagship's primary weapon. The UNS Indomitable had been holding back until now, letting the smaller ships handle the initial engagement. But when Admiral decided the demonstration was complete, he unleashed humanity's ultimate ship-killing weapon: the Stellar Lance. The weapon charged for 3 seconds, drawing power from the ship's fusion reactors and something called a zero-point energy collector. When it fired, it created an artificial solar flare, a beam of plasma and radiation that matched the temperature and intensity of a star's corona. The lance cut through space in a straight line, passing through 40 bioships in a single discharge. The creatures didn't explode or break apart. They simply vaporized, turned instantly into superheated gas that glowed like tiny suns. The beam was so bright it illuminated the entire star system. Coalition ships 55,000 kilometers away had to activate their emergency filters to avoid being blinded. When the light faded, there was nothing left where the beam had passed except expanding clouds of ionized particles. The remaining Void Swarm bioships tried to escape. These creatures had survived for thousands of years by being smart enough to run when a fight turned against them. They began charging their faster-than-light drives, preparing to jump to hyperspace and find easier prey elsewhere. The humans had prepared for this too. Every human ship activated devices called gravity anchors. The weapons reached out across millions of kilometers and locked the local space-time continuum. Suddenly, faster-than-light travel became impossible. The bioships were trapped in normal space with nowhere to run. "Sir," Doctor reported, her voice filled with awe, "they've prevented the creatures from escaping. The humans have locked down the entire region of space." With escape impossible, the last 15 bioships turned to fight. They charged their acid weapons and prepared to sell their lives dearly. These creatures had destroyed entire civilizations. They would not die easily. But humanity had already decided how this battle would end. All 37 human ships fired at once. Not the exotic weapons they had been using, but simple, overwhelming firepower. Energy beams that could cut through planets, missile salvos that carried antimatter warheads, particle guns that fired streams of accelerated atoms at near-light speed. The concentrated fire was so intense that space itself seemed to catch fire. The remaining bioships were hit by more energy than most stars produce in a year. Their healing abilities, their armor, their living hulls, none of it mattered when faced with that level of destruction. When the weapons stopped firing, the Coalition sensors ran multiple scans to confirm what everyone already knew. 0 remaining enemy signatures. Not defeated. Not damaged. Erased from existence. Even the organic matter that had made up the creatures was gone, broken down into basic atoms and scattered across space. The silence after the battle was deafening. 80 bioships that had terrorized the galaxy for years. Creatures that had consumed entire star systems and driven species to extinction. All of them destroyed in less than 5 minutes by 37 human ships. Admiral's voice came over the communication array, calm and professional, as if he had just finished routine patrol duty. Coalition, this is Admiral. Hostile forces have been neutralized. Our deepest condolences for your losses, but your species will survive this day. In the silence that followed the battle, Admiral found himself staring at empty space where moments before 80 bioships had been preparing to devour his civilization. His hands trembled as he tried to process what he had just witnessed. The void swarm was gone, not defeated, not driven off, completely eliminated from existence. "Sir," communications officer said quietly, "Admiral is requesting permission to speak with you directly." Straightened in his command chair, "Put him through." The holographic display activated, showing the interior of the human flagship's bridge. Admiral was a tall human with gray hair and calm eyes that seemed to see everything. Behind him, could see human crew members working at stations filled with technology he didn't recognize. Admiral said with a slight smile, "I'm pleased to meet you under better circumstances than we had hoped for. How are your people holding up?" "We're," paused trying to find the right words. "We're alive thanks to you, Admiral. What I just witnessed, your weapons, your technology. How is any of this possible?" Admiral's expression grew more serious. "Admiral, would you be willing to come aboard the Indomitable? There are things about humanity that I think you should understand. Things that will help you make sense of what happened today." An hour later, Admiral found himself in a shuttle approaching the massive human flagship. Up close, the ship was even more impressive than he had imagined. The hull was covered in armor that seemed to drink in starlight, and weapon ports lined every surface like the scales of some enormous predator. The docking bay was large enough to hold his entire shuttle squadron. Human crew members in dark uniforms guided his shuttle to a landing platform with quiet efficiency. Everything about the ship spoke of controlled power and deadly purpose. Admiral met him personally at the airlock, along with a small group of human officers. They were all polite and professional, but noticed how they moved, like soldiers who were always ready for battle, like people who had learned to be careful in a dangerous universe. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable," said, shaking hands in the human custom. "I'd like to show you something that will help explain who we are." They walked through corridors lined with displays showing star maps, technical specifications, and historical records. The ship was clean and efficient, but there was something else. Something that made realize this wasn't just a warship. It was a monument to human military thinking. Admiral led him to a large room near the center of the ship. When the doors opened, stopped in amazement. The room was filled with memorials, walls covered with names, dates, and images, thousands upon thousands of entries. "This is our war memorial room," explained quietly. "Every conflict in human history is represented here. Every battle, every war, every time humans have fought other humans or outside threats. walked slowly along the walls, reading what he could understand. The entries went back thousands of years. Ancient wars fought with primitive weapons. More recent conflicts fought in space. But what struck him was how many there were. "You fought so many wars," he said. "Yes," Admiral replied. "Humans have been fighting each other for our entire recorded history. We've learned to be very good at it, but more importantly, we've learned something else." He led to a display showing more recent entries. These weren't battles between human nations, but conflicts where humans had protected other species. Alien worlds defended from raiders, trade routes cleared of pirates, rescue missions to save civilian populations. "We learned that the longer a war lasts, the more innocent people die," continued. "So we developed a simple philosophy: end conflicts as quickly as possible, using whatever force is necessary, so that people can get back to living their lives in peace." "But your weapons," said, "the technology I saw today, how did you develop such advanced systems so quickly?" Admiral smiled grimly. "Admiral, humanity has spent 50 years preparing for exactly what we found today. When we first achieved faster-than-light travel and learned about the galaxy, we discovered something disturbing. There are species out there that consume other civilizations, pirates who prey on peaceful worlds, tyrants who enslave entire star systems." He gestured to another display showing intelligence reports about various galactic threats, including the Void Swarm. "We decided that if we were going to be part of the galactic community, we would be its protectors. We've spent 5 decades developing weapons specifically designed to end threats quickly and completely. The quantum cascade cannons you saw today, they were built to stop regenerating bioships. The gravity anchors, designed to prevent hostile fleets from escaping to attack other worlds." "Began to understand. You've been preparing for this war before it even started." "We've been preparing for every war before it starts," corrected. "Because we believe something very strongly: peaceful civilizations should be able to live in peace. When something threatens that peace, we end the threat." They continued through the memorial room and showed him more displays. Records of human military academies where officers learned not just how to fight, but when to fight and why to fight. Philosophical texts about the responsibility of power. Historical analysis of conflicts that could have been prevented with decisive early action. "This is why your weapons are so advanced," realized. "You've been developing them for decades, specifically to fight threats like the Swarm." "Correct. And now that we know about the threats in this galaxy, we're going to do something about them." Admiral led him to a final display that made his breath catch. It showed a map of the galaxy with various markers indicating hostile forces, threatened civilizations, and strategic positions. But what caught his attention were the blue markers showing planned human fleet positions. "You're positioning fleets throughout the galaxy," he said. "We're establishing a protection network," confirmed. "Humanity doesn't seek to conquer or rule other species. We seek to make sure that species like yours can develop and grow without fear of extinction. We fight so others don't have to." As they prepared to return to his ship, Admiral made one final statement that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "Admiral, humanity learned something important during our violent past. We're very good at war, but we've also learned that the best victory is the one that prevents future wars. Today's battle wasn't just about saving your people. It was about sending a message to every threat in this galaxy that peaceful civilizations are under humanity's protection." Within hours of the battle, news spread across the galaxy through quantum communication networks. The Void Swarm, a threat that had consumed 17 star systems and driven 3 species to extinction, had been completely eliminated by humanity in less than 5 minutes. The reaction was immediate. The Galactic Council sent urgent messages requesting human membership. Threatened civilizations broadcast requests for protection. Pirates and raiders throughout the galaxy suddenly found themselves reconsidering their career choices. And in human shipyards throughout the Sol system, construction began on new ships. Because now that humanity knew what threats existed in the galaxy, they were determined to make sure that what happened to the Coalition would never happen to any peaceful civilization again. As Admiral had promised, humanity would fight so others could live in peace.